Hey everybody, it's Elaine, and today I'm going to be talking about The Great Book of Amber, which is by Roger Zelazny. This is essentially a collection of the Amber Chronicles, which totals 10 books or novellas. They're pretty short, like 120-ish pages each, somewhere in there. Anyway, Nona Vera summarizes the books as follows. She writes, Corwin is a prince of Amber, the immortal city from which every other city has taken its shape. All other worlds, including Earth, are shadows of that reality. Corn has spent centuries on Earth as an amnesiac, but when someone in the family tries to kill him there, Corn begins a search for his past. He quickly learns that his family has some very unusual powers. They can travel between Amber, its shadows, and chaos by manipulating reality. Use magical playing cards to communicate and travel instantaneously, and are able to walk the pattern that created Amber. Corrin regains his memory, solves the mystery of his father Oberon's disappearance, and fulfills his destiny, only to disappear into chaos. Merlin searches for Corwin, and his destiny is a son of both Amber and the courts of chaos. His story parallels Corwin's, answering many questions about Amber, chaos, and the next generation in the family. The series starts off with 9 Princes in Amber. I found the first novel to be pretty disorienting. Corwin, the narrator, suffers from amnesia, which I mentioned previously. He spends most of this novel trying to regain his memory. His memory loss and general disorientation made it difficult for me to follow the plot. Basically, since he had no idea what was going on, I had no idea what was going on, and that was pretty annoying after a while. Um, the prose is also a bit bland. Lasney isn't too descriptive, and I would have appreciated something that painted a clear picture. The novel sets the stage for the remaining books in the series. It was a lot of setup, and this makes sense. It's, the first book in a series of 10. With that being said, I would have appreciated more of a payoff for all of the setup, even if it was minor. It just seemed like this is an explanation for everything that's going to go on, and it was kind of boring. The next book in this series is known as The Guns of Avalon. I liked how this novel answered some of the questions raised in 9 Princes of Amber, such as what shadow is and how it works. To some extent, it was a very basic explanation, but at least it was something. However, this novel generated a new series of questions and left others unanswered, such as why Corrin's claim to Amber's throne is better than Eric's claim, or at least why he feels that it is. I appreciate the larger amount of detail Zelazny used in this particular installment. It created a far clearer picture, which made this novel easier to understand than 9 Princes in Amber. I would have liked to see more character development, however. Several years go by since the first book in the series and during this novel, and Corrin really didn't seem to grow as a person, which I thought was strange considering the amount of time that passed. Um, I would have also liked to feel like I knew who he was at this point. I didn't really feel like I understood his true nature, and even at this point, having read the whole series, I don't really feel like I know who he is. Um, this novel also involved a lot of setup. I would have liked to see some more action. With that being said, I really enjoyed the twist at the end of the novel and felt as though it was an improvement over the first installment since there was a lot more going on. The third book in the series is called The Sign of the Unicorn. I felt as though the series really picked up at this point and appreciated the fact that there was always something going on in this novel. I also appreciated the introduction of new characters, which I felt added depth to the previous 2 novels. However, I felt as though the older characters could have benefited from some sort of development. Um, they remained static, and nothing was really going on with that. The Hand of Oberon was next, and I found that I was frustrated by the fact that most of this novel, again, was set up. That being said, I appreciated the payoff, both how Zelazny twisted our understanding of Amber and the surprises at the end of the story. After that, we have The Courts of Chaos. This novel included a lot of unnecessary details and occurrences, which made it both slow and boring. If Zelazny had trimmed the fat, cutting out everything that wasn't essential, then he would have been left with a far stronger novel, roughly half the length of what I read. And that would have been really nice because I didn't show you this, but I went out. The print is really, really small, guys. This took me like 3 months to read. And if he had trimmed out, half of, the stuff that was unnecessary, it wouldn't have taken so much time. And it would have been a stronger series. After the Courts of Chaos is the Trumps of Doom, which begins the Merlin cycle. Essentially, I found it strange that Zelazny just chose, basically out of nowhere, to change his novel's narrator, roughly, again, halfway through the series, from Corwin to his son Merlin. I didn't really get why that happened. I thought it was weird. Um, found it very disorienting. I felt like I was back in book one. I was like, I'm finally starting to get what's going on. And then it was, I don't know what's going on. To be honest, Merlin's just as bland as his father, if not worse in some ways. Didn't appreciate all the typos in this novel. I felt as though there were a number of unnecessary details which could have been omitted in order to make the novel shorter and more enjoyable. Again, following Trumps of Doom is Blood of Amber. I felt as though this installment was unnecessarily long and drawn out. There also didn't seem to be a point to it. Would have been better if it was just streamlined to about 10 pages or just taken out completely, to be honest. I wasn't fond of the typos. Again, just an issue that has not stopped at this point. And I would have liked to see Merlin, also known as Merle, develop more as a character. At that point, he had only proven to be static and boring. I didn't feel like I knew who he was. He was just this narrator who traveled around, talks to himself way too often, and that was it. Expected more at this point. Sign of Chaos is the 8th book in the series, and although the reveal at the end of the novel came as a surprise to me, the novel had a really slow build-up, lackluster climax, and it did not captivate me. Merlin continued to remain static and boring, and again, there were just too many typos. Next is the Knights of Shadows, I'm sorry. For this one, I was frustrated by the continued lack of character development. I felt as though Corwin and his son Merlin could only be described as secretive, which doesn't really describe them at all, and is really pitiful when one considers the length of time that has transpired from the onset of the series until the end of this installment. Remember, this is the 9th book in the series, and couldn't tell you who these people are. The Princes of Amber. That's about all I've got in the courts, and they're secretive. I was also frustrated by the sense that if Zelazny were to remove the name of the individual speaking, I would be unable to tell one character from another. In other words, the sense that they are all static and interchangeable. I know that there are two characters you can tell apart, kind of. One is Ghost, also the Ghost Wheel, and that's only because he's a construct, so he says things that, insinuate that. And then there's a character that's essentially a snake called Glate, and she has little S's, like elongated S's during her speech. But when you look at the speech just generally and you don't consider those little giveaways, the pattern is basically the same. Everyone talks in the same formal way, same awkwardness to certain aspects of their speech, same general type of like prose and means of communication. No matter how well educated or uneducated they may be, it was just weird. Why is everyone talking the same way? They have different experiences. People don't all talk the same way. Yes, I grew up in the same household as my sister, but we don't communicate the same way. I might have gone to school with a bunch of people, or I did go to school with a bunch of people. We don't communicate the same way, but we have all the same teachers. I didn't understand why that was the case in this novel. It's unrealistic, it was weird, and it didn't really help me get to know anybody because they all seemed to be the same person, just with different names and maybe a different sex or, animal nature, I guess, because some of them weren't human. Anyway, I felt as though this novel contained a lot of fluff. It dragged on, and its ending was lackluster. I think it would have been better if it was streamlined a little, and by a little, I mean a lot. The last book in the series is Prince of Chaos, and I really don't have much to say about this except it had the worst ending ever. I've read a lot in my 27 years of life here, and this might be the worst ending to a novel I've ever seen, which is saying something when you consider how much I've read and how many bad endings there are to books. Before I get into my final rating, I just want to talk about the look of this book here. I mean, if you just look at it for what it is, it's a very bland cover. It really doesn't let you know what to expect. It's very generic. The other thing is this book is, a monstrosity as far as length is concerned. It is not comfortable to balance in your lap for more than a few pages. It's just too heavy. Putting it on a table is rough. The pages tend to be so high up that you kind of have to like get up and hunch over it, and that's uncomfortable. Maybe it would be better for someone who's a bit taller than me, but this was just an unwieldy mess for me. I think it would have been better if it was divided into the Merlin and the Corwin cycles. Corwin is the first half, which discusses Corwin. Merlin being the second half, which discusses Merlin. It would have been a little more manageable. Kind of annoying that, you would have to find both sections at the library. Having everything in one book is great. You don't have to, deal with finding all the books. But it's too unwieldy. It wasn't fun to try to read that. The print's also small. Again, lots of issues with grammar, punctuation, spelling, just too many static characters, just not enough development to really engage you, keep you interested. I mean, the intrigue was fun when you got down to it, but the climaxes were too lackluster for all of the build up, and some of it was just confusing. There were too many questions, it took too long to answer, stuff like that. It had a lot of issues, even, though it had its strength, it was just not fun for a good stretch. Overall, I give this a 2.5 out of 5 stars, mainly because of the Merlin cycle. If I was just rating the first half, it'd be like a 3 or 3.5, somewhere within that range. Overall, if you're going to read this, just read the first half. Don't even bother. So read the Corwin cycle, leave the Merlin cycle if you're interested. Thank you so much, guys, for listening, and I'll see you soon. Bye.